Good morning, friends. Students, we are going to learn the remaining part of our first chapter, the last lesson. Let's go through the points that we have last time discussed. Look, as the first point, little French, he started for school very late. He feared a scolding from his teacher, Mr. Hamel, as he was not prepared, for his homework, and that homework was in the form of participle. And when he was going towards the school, there was a big crowd in front of the bulletin board near the town hall. Usually, the people received all kinds of news from there. Generally, this was the place from everything bad, most of the bad news came from there. When he reached his school, he found it usually quiet. He found unusually quiet. Generally, that school had a lot of commotion and noise. The usual hustle and bustle was not there. He went inside the classroom. Before everybody, he was frightened. But nothing happened. Hamel very kindly asked him to go to his place very quickly. And French was surprised to see many village elders sitting on the desk at the back. And at last, Hamel broke a very shocking news to his students. It was a thunderbolt for most of the students and even the elders. An order had come from Berlin, and all the schools in Alsace and Lorraine will learn German from the next day. And a new teacher would come to teach German. Hamel announced that he would deliver his last lesson in French. But as he was going to teach his last lesson, he was very transformed person. Earlier he was very strict, stern and cranky. But suddenly he has transformed himself. He becomes so gentle. Look, and then earlier he used to keep a ruler under his arm to punish the student. He didn't even use his ruler when French got mixed up and confused while reciting the chapter. Hamel regretted the people of Alsace and Lorraine were quite indifferent to learn their mother tongue, French. So the people were never trying to learn their mother tongue. And he called upon the people to guard this language as it was their key to their freedom. So this much we have seen. Now come to page number 7. Then he opened a grammar and read us our lesson. I was amazed to see how well I understood. French said that he was easily able to understand the chapter because earlier he never tried to understand, he was never focused, or he was never that careful. But today, as he felt that he would not be able to learn French language anymore, he was very careful. So all he said seemed so easy I think too, that I had never learned so carefully. So he is accepting this fact that earlier he was not that careful in studying the things, and that he had never explained everything with so much patience. He said that earlier even Hamel didn't teach him with a lot of patience. It seemed almost as if the poor man wanted to give us all he knew before going away and to put it all into our heads at one stroke. It means that on that day Hamel was very focused. He wanted to teach them all, teach all about French language at one stroke. He felt that he would never be able to teach them again in his life. So he thought it is better that I would teach them all the knowledge I have today only. So after the grammar, we had a lesson in writing. That day Hamel had new copies for us. So Hamel had brought some new copies for the children, as he knew that now the children would never be able to learn or write French language. So on the copies written in beautiful round hand, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. On the copies, the name of the district, French and Alsace were written. They looked like little flags floating everywhere in the schoolroom. So it created a very good patriotic feeling in the class. Among the students were aroused with that patriotic feeling, and it looked like, the words like friends, Alsace, it looked like a flag in the class. So it hung from the rod at the top of our desk. You ought to have seen how everyone set to work. Everyone in the class was so focused in his study. Everyone wanted to give his best to this language. And how quiet it was, how pleasant it was, because at that point of time, everyone thought that I would give my best to this language, to my mother tongue. The only sound was the scratching of the pens, the only scribbling sound of pens over the paper. That was the only sound heard in that class. So you can understand what seriousness the students have brought while learning their own mother tongue. Once some beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention to them. Sometimes even a spider comes in the class, students get disturbed, and they love to get disturbed, and they create commotion and confusion in the class. But today, even the beetles flew in, but nobody paid any attention, because nobody wanted to get confused, nobody wanted any problem. Even the littlest one, who walked right on, pressing their fishhook as if that was French. Even the smallest one in the class, they were giving their best to learn this language. On the roof, the pigeon cooed very low. The pigeons were making a cooing sound. So that is the chirping made by the pigeon, is called cooing. And I thought to myself, so here French has an idea that will this German make them sing in German? Means this German army will make even the pigeons to chirp in their language, as they have already imposed this language on them. So it also shows that really when any language is imposed on somebody or any country, the people of that particular country or that district really feels very bad. So, but with the nature, with the creature, with the birds, they are not supposed to do this thing. But he has this thought, will they also make even the pigeon sing in German? So this is next to impossible. They can't do this thing. Whenever I looked up from my writing, I saw Hamel sitting motionless in his chair. So Hamel, he looked so gloomy. He looked so upset. He was distressed that he would no longer able to teach this student. And at that point of time, he was observed by his student, French. French was looking at him, what his teacher was doing. The teacher was, he was sitting motionless in his chair and gazing. He was staring first at one thing and then at another, because for the last time he is looking at this class. He wants to have that feel of the class for the last time, as he would never be able to address the students anymore. As if he wanted to fix in his mind just how everything looked in that little schoolroom, because he would never come to the school again. So he feels it is better that I would have the glimpse of this class for the last time. Fancy, for 40 years he had been there in the same place. For 40 years he has been doing this job. Very faithfully has done his job, with his garden outside the window and his class in front of him. So he is taking a last glimpse of the students, of the whole class, of his garden and even the surrounding. Just like that, only the desk and benches had been worn smooth. The walnut trees, even the greenery outside the class, he's taking the glimpse of those things also in his mind, like walnut trees in the garden were taller, and hop wine, it is a wine of hop plant. Okay, it is used in the making of beer also. So walnut trees in the garden were taller, hop vine that he had planted himself. So this hop vine he himself planted, it has really developed, it has twined about the windows to the roof. It means it has tangled into the windows to the roof. How it must have broken his heart to leave it all. Look, just imagine, for 40 years he has been teaching at the same place. It becomes really very difficult for him to leave this place. The reason is that he loves his language, he loves his people, and really it is always difficult to leave our people. So how it must have been broken his heart to leave it all. Poor man, to hear his sister moving about in the room above, packing that trunk. So while he was observing the students, even the surrounding, at that point of time, his sister was packing their trunk. For they must leave the country next day. Next day, they would not be the part of this village. But he had the courage to hear every lesson to the very fast. Although he was distressed, although he was not feeling well, although he was upset, he would not be able to teach this language, but still he had that courage, that patience. He had that patience to listen to everything that we were speaking. So he had that courage to hear every lesson to the very last. After the writing, we had a lesson in history. So one by one, they actually went through the whole schedule of studying French language. And then the babies chanted. Then the babies started chanting their ba, bi, ba. They were learning how to speak French language. Okay. And down at the back of the room, the old hosier is the elderly person of the society of that village. He had put on his spectacles and holding his primer. I told you the meaning of primer. Primer means it is a book of basic things. There you can find alphabet of French and other things. In both hands, he was holding that book, that primer, and spelled the letter with them. You could see that he too was crying. He was crying because he knew that throughout his life, he has not been able to learn his own language. So even Hamel has made a satire on them, that you pretend yourself to be Frenchman, yet you don't have the knowledge of French language. Really, it is really very pathetic. So he made a satire on them also. But this person, Mr. Hosier, old Hosier, really, he's feeling very bad. He's crying. His voice trembled with emotion, and it was so funny to hear him that we all wanted to laugh and cry. So looking at him, we felt really, we had the feeling of laughing and crying both at the same time. Oh, how well I remember it, that last lesson. How memorable that last lesson became for this small child, French. Because on that day he was focused, because he felt that his patriotic feeling was aroused. On that day he would never be able to learn the language, so he became very focused to learn that thing. So in our life it happens. When we feel we are going to lose something, we get more concentrated, we get more focused. Okay, and in the words of Henry Ford, you can say that if you keep learning, those who stop learning is really they're dead, even if that age is 20 or 80. And if you keep on learning, really you can keep your mind alive. And the greatest thing in the world is what? To make our mind alive by learning more things. So at that point of time, he was so focused, so he actually grasped everything. He understood everything. All at once, the church clock struck 12, right? And it was 12 o'clock. Then the Angelus. So it was followed by Angelus. Angelus means a bell rung for a prayer. So it was a prayer time. And at the same moment, the trumpets of the Prussian, the German soldier, they were coming back from their daily practice, returning from their drill, and they were playing that trumpet. Both these things really create contrast. It was suggesting that now it is your time, that it was given, we feel that An order has come for M. Hamel to leave this place. And sounded under our windows. M. Hamel stood up very pale. His face was colorless. He felt very bad. He was dejected in his chair, but at the same time, he was very confident. He was very proud of French language. So I never saw him look so tall. Here we are not talking about his height. It means I never saw him so tall. It means that M. Hamel was so confident. He expressed all his patriotic feeling for the language, for the people, for his country. My friends, his last words were, my friends, but something choked him, something blocked his voice. He could not go on. He wanted to say something. Emotion choked him. Then he turned to blackboard, took a piece of chalk, and bearing on, he putting all his strength on that, bearing on with all his might, with all his power, he wrote as large as he could. And there he wrote, Viva la France. It means that he wanted that the French language and even the country will live so long. He wanted that his country would go forever. Then he turned to look. Then he stopped and leaned his head against the wall, and without a word, he made a gesture. He made a sign. He made a movement. To us with his hand, he said his last word, school is dismissed, you may go. So students, really we can understand that in this chapter, one has to love his own language for his own identity. And we learn language, we can get a lot of knowledge through language only. And that will lead us to have more education. And by this chapter, we have also learned that if we really get attached to our language and our country, it will show our patriotic feeling for our country. And by learning the language of our country, we can give our best to our own country.